This is the most I've felt hooked by Final Fantasy XIV in a long time, since probably Shadowbringers. Patch 7.2.5 is here, I've played it, and let's talk about it. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and I want to talk about my overall impressions, my thoughts about the state of 7.2.5, how I feel about it, what I like, what I don't like, and the future potential of Dawntrail. There's, at least in my eyes, 3 main pillars for this patch. You have the Occult Crescent, the new outdoor zone filled with new fights to encounter, phantom jobs to acquire and level up. You also have a new Hildibrand quest. Well, technically 2 quests. And then also you have the Gatherer Mamulja dailies. And I think the name of the game here when it comes to 7.2.5 is more of the same. If you have played Final Fantasy XIV for a while, you will be extremely familiar with all these pieces of content. Nothing really out of the ordinary, nothing really innovative, but what I think all of these elements are well executed. So if you already like the type of content that Final Fantasy XIV is able to put out, I think all 3 of these are like rather good iterations on familiar concepts and pieces of content. I talked about in a previous video, this one, my overall feelings on the Occult Crescent, but as I log in more hours, I warm up to the Occult Crescent even more. I think it is really well handled and well executed. And I think a large reason for that is because the critical engagements, in my opinion, are really fun. I like all of those fights, and I like getting better at those fights, even if I'm getting screwed in like 15 different ways when it comes to actually acquiring Phantom Berserker, because that thing does not drop for me. I play Warrior, why do I have Oracle? Give me the giant Berserker one! But I digress. The Occult Crescent is obviously the big, standout, showcasing feature for 7.2.5, and honestly 7.2 on the whole. Because while I never could get into Eureka because when I tried it I was bored out of my freaking mind, it was the critical engagements of Bosja that hooked me to this type of content. And the critical engagements here are really good in my opinion. And while the Occult Crescent isn't perfect overall, and the drop rates of the relic reagents make me want to just lick sandpaper just to feel something again, I think overall the Occult Crescent is a success. I haven't managed to do the raid part of it yet because, well, I'm not level 20. And also this thing is just not spawning whenever I'm playing. But again, not level 20, so I can't do it anyways, I think. The Occult Crescent in a lot of ways has really made Final Fantasy XIV feel like an MMO again, and it's something I think the game is sorely needed. Bosja was one of the main reasons I dumped so many hours into Shadowbringers, and I do not believe the Occult Crescent is going to have the staying power of Bosja. And you may be going, well, Jmulls, why are you saying that when you just said you kind of prefer the Occult Crescent to Bosja? Because in terms of the actual content being offered by the Occult Crescent, from top to bottom, I prefer it over Bosja. I prefer the world design, I prefer the music, I prefer the story going on, I prefer the content, I prefer the fates. Well, fates are a wash because they're fates. I prefer the critical engagements. I honestly kind of prefer the phantom job system, just because I don't feel like I have to, like, pull my lost actions in fear of losing them because I use them on unoptimal things. Like getting a really powerful potion in an RPG and you just never end up using the thing. Kinda how I felt with lost actions. Both phantom jobs, I don't feel that way. Well, besides with Chemist. But why do I feel as if the Occult Crescent is going to have less staying power? It's a very simple reason. You can't level ults here. And I know some people will say, well, not all content like this in the past were designed to have you level ults here. And yeah, sure, that can be the case, but Bosja did it, and I think it was a really good element of Bosja. I played more Bosja because of that, because I had the incentive to be able to level up my jobs while grinding a piece of content for rewards that I wanted. I could multitask and do multiple things that I wanted to do at once, instead of just grinding dungeons or whatever, which is normally how I level up my jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. But that can get dull when you've leveled up so many times. The Occult Crescent is really good content. I would love to be able to swap over to my Red Mage, hit up Time Mage as well, and just see what happens. It would be a good excuse for me to play jobs ordinarily I don't want to be bothered to level right now, while also playing content that I want to do. But for some reason, they have actively decided not to do that, and I'm almost certain the reason is because you're going to be able to level in the Deep Dungeon in 7.3, and I think that's a really stupid reason to not allow alt leveling in the Occult Crescent. Just do it for both. Why not give players variety? Why not give players options? Give the players that freedom. Allow us to make the choice saying, hey, do I want to level up in the Occult Crescent or do I want to level up in the Deep Dungeon? Because the way they're kind of pacing this, and the patch cycle of Dawntrail overall, it really does feel as if the lifespan of the Occult Crescent, for a lot of people at least, is meant to last a patch, until the Deep Dungeon comes online, and then focus is shifted to that. You can still do the Occult Crescent if you want, but it feels to me as if the Occult Crescent has enough to tide people over until the Deep Dungeon comes online, so the Deep Dungeon takes over that spot for a patch until whatever maybe 7.4 brings to the table. A new Criterion dungeon, who knows? I think it's an unnecessary long-term L that the Occult Crescent is taking for no reason when this is really good content in my eyes. Again, is it perfect? No. Some of the phantom jobs, in my opinion, are rather lame. The drop rates for quite a few things feel a little bit sluggish, but overall, the pros vastly outweigh the cons in my eyes. I am a big fan of the Occult Crescent. I like it. It makes me want to play more of it, and it makes me want to play more Final Fantasy XIV as a direct result. And a lot of the actual incentives to grind in the Occult Crescent don't appeal to me. I don't care about any of the glamour because I'm not a Final Fantasy V fan. I want to do the Fork Tower at some point when I get there, absolutely. But another reason I did so much Bosja was because the glamour there really appealed to me. And yeah, this is just personal preference, but it's going to affect how I view this content in the long term because I can't level up my alts here. So while I really like this, the rewards at the end of this grind session don't particularly appeal to me that much. And I'm mostly just leveling up, so eventually, when we get new phantom jobs down the line, and when we get a new zone, my phantom jobs will be all squared away. And also just because, like I said before, I really like the Occult Crescent and I want to play more. But eventually, I'm going to have done all the critical engagements so many times, they'll start to get boring and stale to me, not because they're bad, but because I've done them so many times. That would happen eventually, and I know I'm making a big deal out of alt leveling here, but I do think it is a big deal, because we don't feel it right now in the short term, but I think this content may feel it a little bit for some people at least, in the long term, and it'll just be a con for some people that didn't need to exist. I can't think of a good reason outside of they've done it before, which I don't think is a good reason, by the way, to not allow alt leveling here. Outside of some phantom job abilities like scaling on item level, and I'll be blunt here, if that is the reason, that is really stupid and short-sighted. Just scale people to be at the minimum item level that is required. But what about the balancing? It's the Occult Crescent, you know how wacky some of these things are? Who cares? The priority should be to have fun here. You need some semblance of balance, but I don't think just because someone's level 90, that has to mean the game is completely unbalanced. Do the math. Make it work. It's a shame. But, having said that, the more that I do the Occult Crescent, the more I like it. I really, really like the idea of the phantom jobs. I really like them. A lot of them are really boring to me, and they're not particularly exciting. And I do wish they took a bigger risk when it comes to what a lot of these phantom jobs are actually able to do. Because if the goal is supposed to make me want to level up all of them, I'm not going to want to do that if most of the phantom jobs to me just look kind of bland. Cannoneer is sick though, I just love some of them that freaking cannon. Whenever I see an AoE situation and I'm on Cannoneer, just a smile comes across my face. Let's talk about Hildibrand. I think it's a really solid questline. It's not my favorite, but I think the story going on here is rather interesting, even for a Hildibrand questline where I think the stories tend to be pretty good. Like, I even enjoyed Stormblood to some degree, but I actually think the plot of what's happening in the Hildibrand questline in Dawntrail, I'm all for it. It's cool, and I'm really interested to see where it goes from here. And honestly, it's one of those questlines where the more I think on it, the more I warm up to it. It knows what it wants to be and just leans into it, and I can really appreciate that. And for an expansion overall where the comedic relief has really been hit or miss for me, this has been an absolute hit. And I think it has potential with further quest lines added later down the line with the patches to really blossom into its own and become one of my favorite Hildibrand quests. My current ranking probably goes Endwalker, Heavensward, A Realm Reborn, then Stormblood. I could easily see the Dawntrail Hildibrand quest, like, being in my top 2. I could easily see that when all said and done, if it continues in this direction. It does suffer from what I call the Hildibrand effect, where you wait 4 months for it and you only get 2 quests, which take about an hour and a half. But they are good. Like, they are good quests. And the jokes are really good. It's just, this is largely set up, I can imagine, for future bits and future jokes down the line. But I am really excited for them. Now, honestly, the biggest surprise to me for the patch, and this is going to sound wild, considering I made a video the day before this patch came out about how much I think the daily quests kind of represent a lot of the issues with Final Fantasy XIV game design, and I still hold to that opinion, even now that I've started the Jmulls dailies, but I went from thinking they were going to be completely uninteresting to me to be like, dude, I forgot how pretty Yoctel is. And it's like, the quest itself is like, whatever. They're gathering quests and you're helping them, like, figure out how to, like, build themselves up in the forest and how to plant stuff, right? It's like, whoop-de-doo, whatever. It's kind of what you would expect out of them. But my god, is Yoctel pretty. Specifically, like, the enchanted forest of the Jmulls. And I could only think, while I'm doing these dailies, and I'm flying around this zone, one, how much I could not care less about these characters. There's a part of me that kinda wishes Cosmic Exploration was in Yoctel instead, just because I want more of an excuse to be in that zone. I love the music there, I love the visual aesthetic there. It's a great zone, and it's really driving home one of the biggest issues I have with the Final Fantasy XIV style of doing an MMO. There's not enough of a reason to be out in the world to do meaningful and interesting and engaging content. No, I am not counting freaking hunt trains or fates, because just the vibe of being in Yoctel is so dang good. The ruins, the architecture, the music, the visuals, the lighting. Good god, it's pretty, dude. And I'm really glad I have a reason to be there now, at least, with the Jmulls dailies. Because while I couldn't be asked to care about the story going on there, it's fine, right? Like, it's passable, it's serviceable, it's what you would expect it to be. I just really like having a reason to be in that zone. A hell of a lot more, at least, than the Pelu Pelu dailies. And because the actual content of the Jmulls dailies is about as interesting as watching grass grow, I got to thinking while I was flying around hitting one button to do these quests, saying, it would have been really cool if we could have taken some elements of the Occult Crescent or Bosja or Eureka, and have things like critical engagements or whatever throughout the actual zones. Just as a reason to be out here, as a reason to be in these zones that feel as if they're kind of just there now, collecting dust. I don't know, it's something to think about, and I think a conversation that should happen for Final Fantasy XIV going forward is like, what the heck do we do with these zones? Because I really like the new zone with the Occult Crescent, and the moon is pretty, and I love the fact we're going to different planets. But at the same time, is it healthy that a lot of these zones are just kind of there? Should the game go in a direction where it produces content, at least at some point in the expansion's lifecycle, preferably early on, to give players a reason and an excuse to be out in the world doing meaningful and interesting and engaging content that is fun and enjoyable? There's already systems and mechanisms and rewards in the game to incentivize feat completion for each of the zones. Flesh that stuff out. Make the content that you do to achieve those objectives far more meaningful and impactful and engaging. And I think that could go a long way to tide people over until content like the Occult Crescent is able to come online properly. And I think there is an argument to be made that stuff like the Occult Crescent needs to come online in an expansion's lifecycle earlier. I am of that opinion as well, but I think a lot of the reasons that people have for having that opinion, holding that opinion, is a direct result and a reflection of the game without those pieces of content in it. Because without them, it feels like Raiding Simulator or going back to do old content. Because the content that exists in the world as it is, like Fates and Hunts, for a lot of people at least, myself included, are rather dull and uninteresting. But if there was something online earlier on, I don't think people would mind waiting for 0.2.5 for something like the Occult Crescent, so long as something else exists to tide them over. And I've talked about the overall life cycle of Dawntrail before, and I talked about how I think people will warm up to it, and I think it'll become more fun and engaging as time goes on, and all the content that was advertised for Dawntrail starts to come online. Because while waiting for this stuff really does suck, and can kill a lot of excitement and hype for a lot of people, when the content is there, it is there, and I think it is pretty good. If you're looking for innovation, obviously that's not here, but if you knew how to manage your expectations and you knew what you were looking for, I think you can find a lot of fun in Final Fantasy XIV right now. Because you combine the Occult Crescent with Cosmic Exploration, and with the things that exist in the game right now, there's a good amount of things to do now. It just took too long to get to this point. But now that we're here, when 7.3 comes along, and let's be fair here, I mean 7.3.5, when we get the Deep Dungeon, it'll be something added onto the Occult Crescent and Cosmic Exploration, which will also receive an update at some point in the 7.3 cycle, because Cosmic Exploration gets a new location with each new patch, will be adding on to this experience. So while the older content, like Occult Crescent, starts to dim and be a bit repetitive because we've done it so much, we'll have something new to look forward to and to sink our teeth into. So from here on out, I can see the reception for Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail's patches being rather positive going into the future here, because the existing stuff will continue to exist and will add on to it to freshen things up. So I'm looking forward to the future. I do think this overall cycle is something they need to address for 8.0 and 8.x, but right now, for the rest of Dawntrail, I like the state the game is in right now. It's not perfect, but I think it's a really good version and iteration on Final Fantasy XIV. And if you were to ask me, am I positive or negative in terms of how I'm viewing the rest of this expansion, I would say I'm optimistic. I like what I'm seeing, for the most part, and I'm looking forward to the new stuff. And I'm looking forward to continue doing the things that are in the game right now. I think that's a good place to be. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, leave a comment down below with how are you liking 7.2.5? How are you liking the current state of Dawntrail? What do you hope changes in the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.